Hey, this is Jamie from Stonemaier Games. For today's Sunday sit-down video, I'm going to talk about something a little, I guess it's a little different. It's not like a top 10 list or anything like that. Rather, it stemmed from a few different ideas. Basically, a few days ago, I posted on Twitter, I asked for people's suggestions for companies that are similar to Stonemaier Games, and that the principles and goals of those companies are similar to ours. For example, they only release a few new games every year. They've existed for at least a few years. They have a focus on visuals and on the social side on inclusivity, not exclusives. They don't do a lot of exclusive content. We don't do that at Stonemaier Games. They at least attempt innovative strategies and mechanisms. They're active on social media, and they try to put fans first. So those are like philosophies and goals. The size of the companies itself may vary a little bit. And I got a bunch of suggestions, a lot of companies that I'm very familiar with and that I've followed and been a fan of for a long time. And I did a blog post that I'll link to below about it was a blog post about Instagram for the most part. I was comparing Instagram strategies for different companies. So if you're curious about different companies, these companies that I'll mention today and their Instagram strategies, you can see the post below. You can click on that. There are visuals and photos and whatnot in that post. But I thought I'd take it a step further for today's Sunday sit-down video and look at those 18 companies that are somewhat similar to Stonemaier Games and look at it from two perspectives. The first will be, I'm going to pick my favorite game from each of those companies and talk about my favorite thing about that game in brief. And then after that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the idea of similar companies deciding to merge together or acquiring each other. I'll focus more on the merging and why I haven't actually pursued that and why I kind of wonder if that's a good idea or not. And I certainly love your thoughts about that. So let's talk about games right now, and then we'll talk about business at the latter half of this video. So let's start with, so again, actually the order there's a particular order here. The order that I'll be talking about these games is the order of number of Instagram followers from greatest to least, because that was the original topic of my blog. So I'll start with Druid City Games, which is also Skybound Games, and it was James Hudson's Instagram account. James Hudson started and ran Druid City Games, and now it's part of Skybound Games. And my favorite game from that company is Grimm Forest. And my favorite thing about it, so Grimm Forest is a game where you are deciding simultaneously with other players which resources you're going to go to collect. And depending on how many players go to collect certain resources, like if I try to go collect brick and you try to go collect brick, we will divide them between ourselves. Whereas if I'm the only player to go collect brick to build stuff, I get all the brick. My favorite element in this game is an element of take that. But it's take that in a way that I really enjoy. I've talked about this before. All these mechanisms, you can go check out my videos about these games and you can see my favorite mechanisms in these games. But I love the friend card mechanism in this game because you can only have one friend card at a time, and whenever you gain a friend card, you can either keep it for yourself or you can give it to someone else, which gets rid of their current friend card. So it's a great balancing mechanism in the game. If you have someone who just has a great engine going because of the friend they have, or you think it's too good for them, you perceive it as unbalanced, you can gain a friend card and replace their friend card. So it's take that, you're impacting that player, but you're also giving them a new friend. So they're still gaining something from it. It's not a total destructive or loss element that comes from it. I think that's a really clever element of Grimm Forest. That's my favorite game from Druid City Games. The next company on this list, based on Instagram followers, is Days of Wonder. Days of Wonder is the company that makes it's a company that I've kind of modeled Stonemaier Games after in terms of number of releases, number of new games released every year. And my favorite game from Days of Wonder is Ticket to Ride. They put out a lot of great games, but Ticket to Ride is one that I genuinely have fun returning to. I don't own a copy, but a lot of people do, and I'm always happy to play it. It's easy to introduce to other players. And let's see, my favorite mechanism of Ticket to Ride, I love the route completion. I love how satisfying it is to complete the different routes in the game, and the player interaction. I like the style of player interaction in the game, in that what other players do on the board constantly impacts your decisions, but you're rarely completely blocked from something. There's usually another way to get in to a city that you need to connect to in Ticket to Ride. I like that. I like that there's interaction, but there's backups. You can kind of risk mitigate in this game. similar to On Tour, another game that I really like that uses maps and connections. Let's see, my next up, and you can kind of see it on the top of the stack here, is Roxley Games. And my favorite game from Roxley is Dice Throne. I love Dice Throne. It's one of my favorite two-player games. I love the asymmetry in it. And my favorite thing about Dice Throne are the mega powers. So in Dice Throne, on your turn, you roll all of your dice. You have 5 dice. And then you can get up to 2 rerolls that you can impact with other cards. But typically you get 2 rerolls. And one of the things that you can aim for when you're done rolling is to get all 5 dice have the same exact icon, and it's a specific icon that gives you a super, super powerful ability associated with your specific character. I've only hit this mega ability a few times, but it feels awesome when I do. And I love that every turn you have the potential of hitting it. When you roll the dice every time, there's a chance that you might reroll and get up to that mega ability. And I love using the cards in the game to push myself and increase the chances that I can hit that mega ability. That is my favorite mechanism in Dice Throne from Roxley Games. Let's see here. Pile of games on the floor down here. Okay, number 4 on this list is Czech Games Edition. Probably most well known for Codenames, a game that I genuinely do like. But Tzolk'in is the game that I think of when I think of Czech Games Edition. Tzolk'in is a game that I've talked about many times in my videos. It's a worker placement game that uses time as a mechanism and these gears that you use to move workers around the board. I love time as a mechanism, and I love how it's integrated so smoothly into this game with the gears. You're not really accounting for the time. You are visually seeing time pass, and you can see how long it's going to take for your workers to move up to the resources that you really want. Because in Tzolk'in, you're either placing workers on these gears or you're removing them, and you only get the resources when you actually remove the workers from the gears. I love that mechanism in Tzolk'in, my favorite game from Czech Games Edition. My number 5 company here is Letter Games. Leader Games? Letter Games? L-E-D-E-R. I always see it in print, but I don't pronounce it out loud. And their game, Root. Root is a highly asymmetric game. And the thing I really love about Root the most, other than my admiration for the asymmetry in it, is that unlike in Vast, another game that they have that is very asymmetric, in Root, all players have pretty much the same goal. You have very different ways of getting that goal, but the goal is shared, and the deck of cards is shared and used in different ways. It's really a brilliant use of mechanisms. They could have had different decks for each faction, but instead they said, let's make one deck, and let's make that deck work for all factions. I think that's a brilliant thing to do in this game. Each faction still has their own components, but by sharing the same deck, they cut down on component costs, and they just, by giving themselves that constraint, that design constraint, a lot of wonderful things came out of it. So I love that despite the asymmetry, you're still trying to get up to 30 victory points, and you're still using the same deck of cards. That's my favorite mechanism in Root. Next up is Awaken Realms, a company that's been very successful on Kickstarter in recent years. Tainted Grail is a game that's on the hotness right now as I film this. The only game I played from Awaken Realms is Lords of Hellas. And honestly, I played it once, and I have a video about it somewhere. I don't remember a lot about the game. It wasn't really for me. However, I do want to mention that there's a game of theirs that I haven't played that I think has a really cool mechanism that I've read about. It's their game Nemesis. And in Nemesis, from what I've read, you get to choose, it's a cooperative game, but you get to choose at the beginning of the game, or maybe at some point in the game, if you want to be a traitor or not. I think it's at the beginning. So you get 2 cards, one says traitor, one says not traitor, or loyalist, whatever their version of that is. And you get to choose whether or not you want to be a traitor. So if you could all agree as a group that no one's going to be a traitor, if you don't like the traitor mechanism, you all just agree not to do it, and no one selects the traitor card. Or if you're not in the mood to be the traitor, you just don't select that card. I don't think I've seen that in a game before. I've seen plenty of games with traitor mechanisms where it's forced upon you. The game is telling you that you are the traitor. But I think it's really clever in Nemesis that they leave that choice up to the player. So that's Awaken Realms. I mentioned Lords of Hellas, but I don't remember much about it. But I think that mechanism in Nemesis is really cool, and I look forward to trying that game. Red Raven Games is up next. This is probably the company on the list that I played the most games from. Ryan Lockett at Red Raven Games is very prolific, very talented designer. And my favorite game of his, which I no longer have because it was a campaign game, is Near and Far. Near and Far is a wonderful game, and the thing that I love about Near and Far is the book that you are using to go on journeys. So in this book, every time you play a new episode of the game, a new chapter of the game, you flip this giant book to a new spread, and it shows you a new map. So you've never been on that map before. It's a new part of the world that you're exploring. So there's a real sense of discovery and progression, and you're never playing on the same game board twice. That's so cool that not even with a modular system, that Ryan has created this whole world of I think it was 10 chapters, maybe 10 spreads that we went through. And it was a wonderful adventure due to having that since it wasn't modular, since it was a set design that Ryan created, a set world that he created that you could discover every time you flip a new page. Really, really brilliant mechanism. So that is Near and Far from Red Raven Games. Next up is, talking about trader mechanisms, here is Dead of Winter from Plaid Hat Games. So Plaid Hat's the next company on the list, and Dead of Winter. My favorite thing about Dead of Winter is that every player has their own private objective. One player might be a trader, they might not, but thematically in this, post-dystopian like zombie world, it makes sense to me that each player has their own objectives that they need to complete, objectives that might directly conflict with the group's goals. But to win, all players must individually meet their goals, and the group must meet their goals, and there might be a trader in there. This is, I think, my favorite way to do a trader mechanism, other than maybe this Nemesis way of deciding if you want to be a trader or not. But I love that you're often torn between doing what's right for yourself or what's right for the group. You need to eventually do both, and suspicion is high throughout the game because you see players doing things in their own self-interest, and you don't know whether or not they are the trader or if they're just trying to accomplish their personal goal. That's my favorite mechanism in Dead of Winter from Plaid Hat Games. Next up is Mind Clash Games. Mind Clash is known for Tricarion and Anachrony. Those are the two games that I played of theirs. I don't own either. Anachrony, I'm going to pick Anachrony between the two of those games. And my favorite mechanism in Anachrony is that you can get stuff from the future that you can use now, and you have to be able to actually have that stuff when you get to the future. It's a weird mechanism, but it is really, really cool because it uses this time travel mechanism where you're saying, okay, I don't remember the resources in the game, but I need 3 crystals. I have no way of getting them right now, but I can tell my future self to send them to me, and voila, I have 3 crystals. With the trouble being that if when I get to that future point in time, I need to still have 3 crystals that maybe I acquire in some other way so that I can send them back to myself in the future. It's a weird mechanism, but it is so cool. Such a clever mechanism that really I think could go in any game with time travel. I think this mechanism works really, really well in games with time travel. That's my favorite mechanism from Anachrony from Mind Clash Games. Next up is GARP Games, another company that I played a lot of games from recently. I just played Paladins for the second time the other night. But I think my favorite game from this company, between Raiders, Architects, and Paladins, I think it is Architects of the West Kingdom. I'm pretty sure. All these games are great worker placement games, great innovative worker placement games. But Architects is it's a really cool game. And I love how many workers each player has. You just have a huge pile of workers that you can place on the board. So it just feels so satisfying to not only start with a ton of workers, but see workers accumulate on action spaces and to have those action spaces get more and more valuable as you place more workers there. At the same time, though, as you do that, those spots become more attractive for other players to use the arrest mechanism, where they come in and they arrest all the workers that are there. So it's a really interesting style of player interaction. In that all players are kind of incentivized to pile up their workers at certain times on certain actions, but at the same time, you're kind of keeping an eye on other workers and considering, do I want to use my turn to arrest all these workers, or do I want to use my turn to continue to boost this action that I've already invested a lot of workers into? That's my favorite mechanism in Architects of the West Kingdom from GARP Games. Next up is Restoration Games, a company that's made its name from taking old games and modernizing them with new components. And it should be no surprise that my favorite game from this company is Downforce. I absolutely love Downforce. It's a racing game, it's tense, it plays well up to 6 players, it's easy to teach, and my favorite mechanism in the game is the positive player interaction, or just the player interaction in general. I usually associate this game with positive player interaction, but there's really also a bunch of blocking that happens in this game. But I just love that you are playing these cards with different colors on them in a specific order, and that shows you which cards you need to move. And so at any given time on your turn, you're probably moving more than one card. You're not just moving your card. And so you're trying to strategically use those cards so that the other color cards on the card don't move very far, and your card does move up ahead of these other cards. But I love that inevitably you're going to end up moving other cars, and that kind of feels good when it's not your turn and you see someone else moving your car around the track. That feels good. I really, really like that style of engagement. It helps with the downtime of the game. Not that there's much downtime at all, but it does help because other things are happening. Good things are happening when it's not your turn. And it feels like positive player interaction to me. That's Downforce, my favorite mechanism in Downforce from Restoration Games. Next up is Inside Up Games. Again, no surprise if you follow me or this company. My favorite game from Inside Up Games is Summit. And in Summit, my favorite, it's a climbing game that you can play cooperatively or competitively. Here's what the board looks like. I've only played cooperatively. I love the leapfrog mechanism in this game. So you have these workers that are going up a mountain. And each player has a character that's going up this mountain. And you get to, if my character is up ahead of yours, you can use a movement to jump over mine. So we're constantly collaborating and cooperating to make each other's movement easier using this leapfrog mechanism. I also love the event cards in this game. They're fun, they're zany, they're weird, they're memorable. I just had a lot of fun with the event cards in this game. But those two mechanisms are awesome. Summit from Inside Up Games. Next up is Capstone Games, which releases a lot of heavier games, some of which I've enjoyed, some of which I haven't. But one of their lighter games is The Climbers, and I really enjoy The Climbers. I don't have a copy of it right now, but it's one of these games where you're staying up and moving around the table and moving your little climbers up this. I guess it's essentially a mountain. I guess I just talked about another climbing game. Maybe I like climbing games now. But you're using these blocks that you have to pick up from somewhere around this mountain and put them somewhere else on the mountain so that your worker can ascend and keep on moving. Basically, you're trying to keep on moving, and it's a really cool mechanism. It's this spatial puzzle. It's not a dexterity game. It's a spatial puzzle that you need to see in 3D. So you need to stand up and move around the table to see which blocks to move. It's not exactly a mechanism, but I love that the 3D element of climbers is so important to the game. It gets you off your feet, gets you on your feet, gets you looking at this puzzle from different angles. That's The Climbers from Capstone Games. Next up, from Thunderhorse Games, a company that I really, really admire, that I've kind of paid attention to from a social media and marketing and Kickstarter perspective for a while now. Still only played, I think, one of their games, and that game is Rolling Ranch. It's a delightful little roll and write game. Pretty light, but it's easy to teach. And I just love the choices on these dice. You roll these dice around here. I'll pull them out while I have this open. And one player rolls the dice, and you get to choose exactly how you're going to use the dice. There's a bunch of different ways to use them. It's actually been a little while since I played this, so I don't want to talk about it too much in detail and mess something up. But say I roll this pig here, and I roll this pig over here. I can use the resources on these dice. So I can say, okay, I choose resources this turn, and then I'll get 2 wood and a little builder icon. Is that right? Yeah. Or I can choose. Oh man, I'm gonna forget the other thing. I think I can choose to write down a pig on the opposing number. So if I say I want the animal on this die, I can choose to write it down on a 4 space somewhere on my mat. So you're kind of, I'm probably not saying this completely correctly, but I like that you're rolling the dice, but you still have a lot of choices that emerge from the dice just from even what you select, not just and in addition to where you actually write that stuff down on your mat. So I really like how much information is packed onto these dice, giving players choices in this roll and write game. That's Rolling Ranch from Thunderhorse Games. The next company on the list is Chip Theory Games, and I have to admit I haven't played any games from Chip Theory Games. I didn't want to leave them off the list because they are mentioned on my post about Instagram, but hopefully I'll get to try a Chip Theory game at some point in the future. They're most well known for, I'm blanking on the name now. It's oh man, what is the name? I'm gonna blank on it. Tell me in the comments the game from Chip Theory Games that I'm blanking on right now. Almost last on the list is Thunderhorse Games. That has two games that I really love. A game that I own and a game that I don't own. It's honestly hard to choose between the two of them, but I'm going to go with Cartographers. I've really, really enjoyed Cartographers. I mentioned it on my top 10 list of 2019. It was up near the top of the list. It uses a couple mechanisms that I love. I love the scoring mechanism. This thing I love in games where every round you're going to score two different cards. So you put these out at the beginning of the game. You know exactly what you're going to score over the course of the game and when you're going to score it. But you're only going to score each of these cards twice. So in the first round, I think you score A and B. Next round is B and C, and then D and A. So you're combining these different cards to score them at different times. Really, really cool scoring system. Isle of Skye uses it. I love that scoring system. But also, Cartographers has this cool roll and write thing where at certain points in the game, if you draw a monster card, instead of you writing down something on your mat, you have to pass your entire map to another player, and they draw the monster on your map, so they can actually impact what you're doing. They can't destroy it, they can't ruin it, but they are impacting it from drawing a monster on your map. And I think that's a really, really cool interactive element of Cartographers. So that's Cartographers from Thunderhorse Games. And last, I have Pencil First Games. With my favorite game from Pencil First is Heroes and Tricks. It's a game I don't have right now, but it's a trick-taking game that comes in this box that you use as you play the game, where you pass the box around the table and you peek at the front card of the box to gain some information before you make a decision on your turn. I think that's just a really clever use of a component. I like that they integrated the box into the design of the game, and it really feels like you're looking at a secret every time you open up that box. Those are 18 companies, my favorite games from those companies, my favorite mechanisms from those companies. I have a few minutes left to talk about the other topic, the business side of things, which is why don't companies that are similar and have similar goals and principles and philosophies, why don't they merge more often? And would I ever consider merging like Stonemaier Games with one of these other companies that has very similar goals and approaches? And it's not that I wouldn't ever consider it, but I do struggle a little bit with the added benefit to either company, why they would do this. So intuitively, you think, okay, well, if we merge with a company that has 20,000 e-newsletter subscribers and we have 40,000, suddenly combined we have 60,000. But I don't know if it really works that way, because A, there's going to be overlap between those two companies. B, in the game industry, a lot of us already support each other. I mean, it's not like in my e-newsletter I'm not actively talking about these other companies, but I make these videos. I am actively talking about other companies all the time and games from other companies. And if you're in the game industry, I think a lot of people just love games. They're sharing their love of games with each other. It doesn't necessarily feel as competitive. It's not collaborative either. It's somewhere between collaborative and competitive. But I want to see these companies do well, and so I actively share them. So I don't know if that a combined marketing effort really makes that big of a difference. And the other big important thing, in my opinion, is that the people who sign up for my e-newsletter, they weren't signing up to learn about another company's games. And so to me, it's a little bit of a betrayal of trust if I'm suddenly talking about something very different than what people signed up for on that e-newsletter. That it just, I don't know if that's really the right way to treat e-newsletter subscribers. That's just one angle of it. That's like the marketing angle of it. Would we share resources? Is there a benefit from sharing resources? And I struggle with that too, because what that probably means to me is that I either have more work, or I have, because I'm managing twice as many things as I previously was, which I don't really want to do. I don't want to manage more stuff if I don't have to. Or it means that we continue to operate completely independently, that we're not sharing resources, and then there's no shared resource benefit. So I guess I struggle with that idea too. Like, what are you really combining there to gain? I don't know. There are other perspectives too. Like, does your size matter? Do distributors care how big you are? Maybe for some of these companies, maybe they would care if they like if Days of Wonder, they sell a lot of games. If Days of Wonder went to went to one of these smaller companies that's up and coming, and they said, we want to merge with you, that would be very visible for that smaller company. I get that. But at a certain point, there's a certain threshold on this list where I don't know if the added visibility is really worth all that much in terms of how distributors view us. Distributors just want to sell games. And retailers just want to sell games. So if there's a hot game, I don't think they care if it comes from a tiny company with one employee and 2 other games, or if it comes from a company like Days of Wonder or Fantasy Flight. They just want to sell that game. So I don't know if that visibility or that size really matters there either. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling here. I don't really know. I guess the idea is, what are the tangible benefits of merging with another similar company and a company of a similar size? What is the benefit of doing that? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, or if you kind of agree with me and you think there isn't really all that much of a benefit, that it's the benefits are vague at best. I'm open to hearing those thoughts as well. Also, of course, I mentioned a bunch of companies here. Feel free to name your favorite games from a few of these companies, and what you like about those games. I'd love to hear about that in the comments as well. All right, thanks. Have a good Sunday.